Where are you coming from, Spider-Man? Nobody knows who you are.
All right, hello and welcome to Big Dumb Movie, where we talk about a different Big Dumb movie every episode. I'm your host, Corey, and I'm here with Alan.
Hello, I'm Alan.
And Steve.
Hello, I'm Steve.
All right, so what movie are we talking about today, Alan?
All right, so today we're talking about Spider-Man 3, which I also refer to as Sam Raimi's 2007 Spider-Man 3, the third Spider-Man in the series, and also the longest at 2 hours and 20 minutes. I thought that was interesting. That is, it is the longest of the three.
Well, I clocked it at 2 hours 19, but no big deal. All right, so did you see this movie in theaters, Alan?
Yeah, I saw it in theaters, and I don't remember much of it. I thought it was kind of a forgettable movie. I remembered all the scenes rewatching it, but thought it was pretty forgettable. So I remember seeing it at the theater, but nothing particularly stands out.
What about you, Steve? Did you see it in theaters?
Absolutely. This was pretty highly anticipated for me. I remember hearing for years that Raimi was not interested in putting Venom in a movie, and I was a big Spider-Man fan growing up, so the fact that he'd made it into a film was really appealing. Pretty sure I waited outside a theater at midnight to see an early screening of this with some friends, and I kind of ended up having the same experience that Alan did. I think as a fan who had kind of specific hopes for the film, it was a letdown.
Oh, definitely. I heard the same thing about Venom. Didn't the studio or something make him put Venom in, and he didn't really want to, which is why he killed him off, I think, at the end?
Right. The version of the story I think I remember reading / hearing is that Avi Arad basically went to Raimi at some point and said, "You've got to put Venom in a movie because it'll make a lot of money." And that was more or less what convinced him.
Well, he wasn't wrong.
Right. I think the more interesting part is they apparently then encouraged him to tell people he didn't want Venom in a film so that people wouldn't think Venom was going to end up in the film.
Do you know what his original idea for that was? I mean, he didn't want Venom, but what was he originally trying to do with that film?
I recall reading that it was supposed to be the Vulture, which they ended up using in Homecoming.
With Michael Keaton?
Yeah, well, I doubt Michael Keaton was originally going to be the Vulture, right?
I wouldn't think so, no.
Not at the time. Michael Keaton had like a kind of a comeback a few years ago, it seems like, so he started showing up in more things. At least that's the way I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Birdman was that was almost the point of it, right?
Right, before he played a Birdman in Spider-Man Homecoming.
Birdman playing Birdman?
Right. I know that they were going to have Mysterio, or at least there was talks of that, in one of the Spider-Man films, and from what I heard, he was going to be Bruce Campbell, who had like... Bruce Campbell, you know, plays different characters in each Spider-Man movie.
Right.
They're like crucial to the story on some level, but also kind of an insignificant character plot-wise. Like he shows up in the first one as like the wrestling announcer, and he gives Spider-Man his name, actually, if you remember.
That's right.
He says, "I'm the Amazing Spider," or "I'm the Human Spider," or something.
Right.
And he introduces him as Spider-Man when he goes into the wrestling match.
That ill-thought match against Bonesaw.
Yeah, Macho Man Randy Savage, rest in peace. In the second movie, he's like the usher or something.
That's right, at the theater where Mary Jane is performing.
Right, yeah, and he doesn't let Peter Parker in to go see her, then she gets really mad at him about it, basically. And in the third one, he's that French waiter, that snooty, like, French waiter. Yeah. So apparently he was going to be Mysterio, I guess, and one of them is like he's like some illusionist or something. I don't know that much about Mysterio.
The only thing I really remember about Mysterio was something to that effect, and that he wore what I remember being a green suit with a purple cape and had what looked like a fishbowl on his head filled with smoke.
Yes.
Yeah, like the orb. He had like an orb helmet, and you couldn't see his face.
Right.
The helmet.
Oh, he appeared in a Spider-Man game for the Game Boy, if my memory serves me.
He was in a Spider-Man game I had on the Game Gear. I don't remember the exact. Yeah, he was in a Game Gear version.
Yeah, game.
Anyway, what do you say we get right into the movie?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, who wants to talk about the intro? How about you, Alan? Like, this movie starts off with, what do you remember?
Okay, I'm going to be totally honest. The first note I have mentions James Cromwell. Because I thought it was funny he was in the movie. But that wasn't in the beginning.
So you started taking notes 20 minutes in. Okay. Steve, what happens in the beginning?
So you get the title sequence, which is mostly just clips of the first two films. And then I think it segues from there immediately into Mary Jane's introduction, which is her performance on stage. Oh no, there is a little bit of a voiceover. I'm sorry, there is a voiceover with Peter being in the classroom and something about the wedding ring. I've already forgotten a lot of the details of that intro.
Okay, I'll recap what I remember of this intro. This movie is long and it sucks. Also, spoiler warning for everything in this movie. Okay, so it starts off with this weird 90s intro credits, kind of like The Matrix, and a lot of movies back then seemed to do. I mean, this isn't a 90s movie, but it has that weird X-Men style intro credits. But yeah, after that it does a recap, or during that it does a recap. And then it goes into Spider-Man breaking the fourth wall, telling the audience, "Hey, I'm Spider-Man. I get good grades. I save the city every now and then." And he's basically saying how great his life is at the beginning of this movie. I don't know. I'm watching it thinking, okay, everything is great, so everything's going to go bad, apparently, right? That's why he's telling us this. Anyway, that's what I took away from that. But it goes into the other side characters at the beginning. It goes into Harry. He's very clearly out for revenge because he thinks Spider-Man killed his dad.
Yeah.
And it goes into Mary Jane. She's some kind of Broadway star. And that's kind of where it starts off. It sets up each character and it kind of tells us where they are in the beginning.
That's right. The Mary Jane introduction, I think, was one of the first red flags for me. It's very cliche the way it's put together. They have her coming down from the staircase with the spotlight on her. It's very angelic lighting. I know she's supposed to be performing on Broadway, but here's Peter's projection of Mary Jane
of a perfect girlfriend.
Right, exactly. It's angelic, and the lights coming down on her, and it's whoa.
And she's a star.
Could we make this a little bit more obvious?
Definitely.
So one thing I remember from the beginning is there's a scene where he's in class, and one of the other guys behind him throws a piece of paper at him or something. But I thought it was
shines a light in his eyes.
Yeah, but I thought it was weird. Peter didn't use isn't he Spider-Man? He just let that guy do that. He couldn't avoid that, or
I don't know. I don't think he's gonna reveal that he's Spider-Man in front of the whole class necessarily.
But doesn't he have fast reflexes, or isn't he able? Doesn't he have spider sense still? He doesn't have to say he's Spider-Man, but
not during class, man. He's really got to focus.
All right.
Beating up Flash was really the one instance where he could unleash it in the school and not be suspected somehow.
Yeah, he's in college now.
Okay.
So it goes into Sandman. Do you guys remember he escapes from prison somehow? Right. It doesn't really show a lot of that. It just shows him basically running from the cops.
Yeah, so it's a pretty basic scene, like Corey said. It just shows him running from the cops, so you get the idea that he's a convict on the run. There's really not much to that scene. The weirder part about Sandman is how it all started. So when he goes to the testing facility, they never explain what that testing facility was there for.
Oh, you mean when he gets his powers?
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens a little bit later. But
okay.
One thing I thought was weird about Sandman is that he doesn't have a character, except that his character is he has a kid. So that's it. At the beginning, he goes home after he escapes prison, and he has a kid who's sick. Yeah. So he needs to steal money so that she can get an operation or something. They never really say. He's I'm going to get the money to make you better. If he steals enough money, she'll be cured. I don't know what they're trying to do with Sandman other than say he has a kid. That's what he is. He's a guy with a kid.
I promise I'll make you healthy again. Whatever it takes. I'll get the money.
You get out of here now.
Well, the whole point of that is to play to the emotional side. Because now you feel for that character. Maybe he's not a bad guy. He's doing it for his daughter or his kid.
Yeah, I guess that's the idea.
Yeah.
I think the sense of depth there is that he's a Sandman with a kid.
Oh, man. So I think who was it, Steve? You were talking about Peter talking to Aunt May saying he's going to propose.
Yes. Just so much of the early... the first third of the film just felt cliche to me. There's the scene with Mary Jane on the stairs, and he says, "Oh, that's my girlfriend," and then he's got to get Aunt May's permission and get the ring from her, and here's this family heirloom moment between him and Aunt May, and
Yeah.
she can reminisce about Uncle Ben, which is obviously the sore spot for the entire story, and it just felt very kind of wrought to me.
Yeah, I remember she's talking about the old Uncle Ben stuff, and she's saying, "Oh yeah, I remember when he proposed to me," and she's telling this story. There's this line that I just hate.
She mentioned they were good swimmers.
Yeah, she's like, "We were really good swimmers. We went for a swim, and oh boy, were we really good swimmers." I don't know. It just that part fucking irks me, man. Like she.
Oh, I hope you've considered a proper proposal. Your uncle had it all planned. He took me to the beach one Sunday. Oh, he was a knockout in his bathing suit. And I didn't look too bad myself. We were very good swimmers. And it was a beautiful day, and he said, "Let's swim to the island."
It's just weird delivery or a weirdly written line. I don't know.
It doesn't seem to fit in with anything. It just kind of, she just says it.
It's a non sequitur, absolutely. It's just like, oh, we were also really good at swimming.
We were very good swimmers.
Right, like what were they, like Olympic swimmers? Like what does that mean? Like think about this. If you're telling your kids like, yeah, I remember when I went with your mom when I was younger and
We were very good swimmers.
we went swimming, like why would you say that part? Does it imply that you were like training to compete? I don't know.
That was some important aspect of her life.
Right. Maybe that's like a comic backstory. Maybe in the comics, her and Uncle Ben were like Olympically trained swimmers, like Michael Phelps or something.
That's how Aunt May remained fit enough to fight off the Goblin that one time.
Did she fought him off? I don't
No, I
remember.
was just making things up.
Oh, okay.
You
She
know,
went
like,
toe to toe with a
double thinking,
goblin?
You're like, oh, wait, maybe she did.
No, I mean, come on. If Gwen Stacy couldn't survive the Goblin, there's no way Aunt May's going to.
Well, Gwen Stacy is useless
Right.
in the context of this film.
Absolutely.
So in the beginning, we kind of set up each character. We go to Spider-Man, Mary Jane. We see where everyone's at. The Sandman. Harry's out for revenge, and things really kick off when Peter's. I think he's just like walking home, or he's doing something innocuous, and he gets attacked by Harry.
He's scootering home.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. He's scootering home. He drives a scooter. I forget about that.
Right.
Alan, describe when Peter gets attacked by Harry. Like, what's this scene like?
So the scene, if I remember correctly, it starts off with Harry swooping in and kind of ambushing him. And the first thing is you'll notice everyone is the hoverboard, which I know you referred to as a snowboard.
Yeah, it looks just like a flying snowboard.
Yeah. And ever since you said that, that's all I could focus on is just how it looks exactly like a flying snowboard. But yeah, Harry just kind of ambushes him, and then they start fighting, and the scene gets pretty chaotic pretty fast. It seems to go from 0 to 60 pretty fast.
Well, how does it look? Like, Steve, do you remember what this scene looked like?
It seemed to me to be a very fast cut, fast sweeping motion based. You know, I think they were trying to give the impression of something very disorienting happening, and then they get up in the air, and Peter's trying to web his way behind Harry on the sled, or on the, I don't even know what the right thing to call his rocket
Sled.
propelled-
Yeah, it's
snowboard.
just call it the snowboard, man.
Right.
It's a snowboard.
Or- looks vaguely like something Batman might try to ride, but yeah, and it was a pretty action packed fight. I think that's kind of another trope moment, though, right? It's like, okay, we're going to throw you into the action now. So here's all this. You think this is this innocuous moment where Peter's being happy on his scooter, and then swoops into Harry, and it's a battle.
And it's very cliche on that note, like Steve mentioned, because there's a lot of cuts, and the cuts show them struggling, and it's very back and forth like you would expect. You know, Peter has the upper hand for one moment, and then Harry flips it on him, and it's a very cliche back and forth, and they both struggle.
They set a pretty high mark, I think, with the Doc Ock fight on the subway car or the L car in the second one.
I agree.
Right? And I don't think they lived up to it in the third one.
Now, I haven't seen Spider-Man 2 in a while. I remember really liking it, especially compared to this one.
It's my favorite of the three, personally.
Right. Yeah, mine too.
Right.
Though I haven't seen it in a while. The effects in Spider-Man 3 do not hold up for me.
It's true.
They probably don't in Spider-Man 2 as well. I just haven't seen it in a long time.
Right.
What I remember about the Harry-Peter fight is that it just looked like crap. Like,
Right.
their effects are really rubbery, and they're just kind of like bouncing around all over the place until Harry gets bonked on the head.
I think a lot of that was the effects. For me, the effects weren't so much of an issue. I thought that they weren't great. I mean, at the time, they were probably okay, but especially now, they're not great. But I don't think it was as much of an issue as how chaotic the scene was. I just think it was because there were so many cuts, and it seemed to move really fast.
I think
Yeah, disorienting, I think one of you said, which is pretty appropriate.
right. This stuff, like, I will fully concede. When I saw this movie the first time, the CG quality in the moment seemed perfectly adequate to me. And I remember hearing they had to develop custom software just to make it work. But I will also say I agree that it hasn't aged well, and this is a consistent theme. Like, I thought the Jabba in the '97 version of Star Wars looked cool too when I was 13, but
Sure, yeah.
right, if you've watched it recently, it does not hold up.
They did redo that, though.
Right, for the Blu-rays, and it looks
Yeah.
a little better. It's prequel Jabba instead of like with the weirdly spaced cat eyes.
Yeah.
from '97.
It went from blue to like a darkish green.
Right.
So you were saying something about that earlier last time we talked about they had to reduce the effects, or like they invented some new technology.
Yeah, from what I was reading, I guess they did not really have software to make Venom work at the point they actually started principal photography. And there were some pretty significant cost overruns on the film, and one of them was associated with the fact that this team of programmers spent thousands of man hours assembling the software they needed to make this work. And that it was kind of a stretch to make it happen, which I think is a pretty interesting side note.
What was the total budget of this film?
So that is actually this. I don't remember what the number was. There was some amount of contention, though. I know that the official budget they published only actually covered like principal photography and the advertising, and did not include all the overrun. And they ended up doing weeks worth of overshoots. And there were people saying that the actual cost was over $300 million, and that as of right now in 2018, it would still be the second most expensive film ever made, behind that Pirates movie, Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
That's a whole
So,
nother thing
right.
with pirates and how much that cost. But
Wait, which Pirates movie was that?
Was it At the World's End that broke
The third one or the fourth
the
one?
box office record? I can't remember which subtitle it was, but one of the Pirates movies broke the budget record, broke the all-time budget record for the production of a film.
well, that's because they paid Johnny Depp like $30 million, or they paid
It was so massive.
how much of that went to Johnny Depp?
I can Google it.
Well, I know that they filmed Pirates 2 and 3 like back to back to, I don't know, make that process easier. So maybe 2 and 3 have their like budgets counted as one because they were kind of shot together. I don't really know how they break that down.
I remember
Right.
it specifically, like Steve says, it was one Pirates film that has that record. It was one film.
Oh, okay. So it was just a singular movie.
Yeah,
I don't remember which one. I think Steve.
My
tried to
phone is
Google
not
it.
loading very quickly, but yeah, I think it may have been At World's End. It's definitely one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, holds the record currently for the most expensive movie produced. I'm not sure whether or not that's inflation adjusted, but if the speculation about Spider-Man 3 is correct, it would still technically be, assuming the stories are true, it would still technically be the second most expensive non-inflation adjusted film that was ever made.
That part is insane to me. That it's arguable, but it's still arguable to be second place for the most expensive.
Right.
Second? $300 million?
That's the guesstimate. I think the official budget was something a little over 100, but people are saying that it was really more like double that after they accounted for the overruns.
And even
Yeah.
costing that much, it made money at the time, and it's made money now, hasn't it?
Yeah, it was profitable. It
Yeah.
was profitable, but it was also the film, the reviews and the fan response are what convinced the studio to cut Raimi off and start over. He was committed fully for a fourth film, so was Maguire, and they were talking about optioning the series out to as many as 6 films, and 3's where it ended because he's kind of screwed the pooch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good insight there.
Yeah.
All right, so back to the story. We have that fight where Harry gets a bonk on the head, right?
Right.
Which was a weird choice. I thought it was weird they chose to do that.
Right. So what happens after he gets hit on the head, Steve?
Man, how does that fight end? Oh, that's right. He hits his head on the pipe and
Several
goes unconscious
times.
several times. I mean, that really. Harry's not supposed to be superhuman. They can explain Peter surviving incredible injury because he's supposed to be superhuman. Harry probably should have like shattered his entire skull. I mean, he rams his head against this huge pipe. He's falling like 50 feet at the time. He's not wearing his helmet when it happens. Like, there's no reason he should have survived.
His helmet
this.
isn't even a helmet. It's just like a mask.
Right? Yeah, it's just like a plastic face shield. So what's it going to do anyway? In fact, it may have been worse. It could have broken into his face.
Well, you know, he doesn't want to hide that sweet James Franco hair.
Right? That's where the money is, you know, is that face. But, so yeah, he ends up unconscious, and Peter gets him to a hospital where they discover that he now has amnesia, which is super convenient.
Right.
How cliche. Oh, he has amnesia.
Oh, there's that word again. So we did breeze over something a little bit earlier with Harry. He actually did get the Green Goblin powers because he found his dad's stash of Green Goblin stuff. Remember I said earlier he's like out for revenge? He actually found all the Green Goblin weapons, and he walked into the green smoke machine.
You're absolutely right. I'd completely forgotten there's that scene of him bathing himself in the green superpower mist. So, yeah.
Right.
So I take it back. I guess that explains it.
I made a note of that, and I thought that scene was terrible because it was basically just like a green fog machine.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever been in a green fog machine?
It was
You
an
don't come
inky
out the
green.
same.
It just didn't look well. That scene bugged me because it was just a 30-second scene of him standing in green fog, like walking out of the machine, and now he has like superpowers.
Yeah, it's kind of like he steps out. He doesn't say this, but it's as if to say, like, I will have my revenge. Or maybe he does say that. I don't know. I'll have to check that.
It's a weird scene with green fog, and I didn't like that scene.
Yeah,
I thought
one
that was
thing-
unnecessary.
Really quick, because Corey, I think you might have noticed it too. I caught something regarding Harry that I did not notice in the 2 or 3 previous times I've seen this film. When they're panning through his outfits, his masks, there's a gold one sitting in the mist.
Yeah, it's like gold or silver. It's like
Silver?
it's shiny.
And it's a hobgoblin mask.
Is that what it's supposed to be?
Yeah, it is supposed. I mean, I'm convinced that is supposed to be a hobgoblin mask and was an Easter egg. And but it never otherwise gets like discussed or shown. There's no explanation as to why the mask is there or when he would wear it or if it was a prototype. And like, I think they may have been intending for that to appear later in the franchise.
Yeah, you're probably right about that. I didn't know what his villainous character's name was until I saw the end credits the first time. It's the New Goblin.
The New Goblin.
Yeah, so we got the Green Goblin in the first one, and then this one, which I assumed before I saw it was going to be the Hobgoblin,
Right.
is the New Goblin, which is basically the same thing except he's on a snowboard instead of a glider, and he doesn't wear a mask like covers his whole head. He just covers his face so we can show the hair.
Would it have been too much to have pumpkin bombs? I wanted the pumpkin bomb.
Well, there is a pumpkin bomb that makes an appearance.
That is true.
And it is a significant part, but just one, I think.
Well, we'll get to that, but I thought it wasn't a pumpkin bomb. It's just like a regular grenade.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, it's round like
Yeah,
the
that's
pumpkin
what I mean,
bombs,
but
but I don't think it has like the jack-o'-lantern face on it.
And
Like,
that's what I'm missing,
Yeah.
really. is that-
That's what makes it a pumpkin bomb. Otherwise, it's just a regular bomb.
right, yeah. That's like an orange grenade, you know. It needs that face. Well, you wouldn't just put a pumpkin at your front door and say, yeah, it's a jack-o'-lantern. That's a pumpkin.
right. I guess you're right. Jack-o'-lantern bomb. All right, so where do we pick up from there? So he gets his head bonked, and he doesn't have his memory anymore. Peter goes to visit him, and he forgets all about how much he hates Peter and Spider-Man, and he's like, oh, it's Peter, my best friend. So he loses his short-term memory,
Oh,
right?
hi, Peter.
Yeah, and there's an important small scene there where you could tell Peter struggles with lying to him when Peter realizes he has amnesia.
Right.
And Peter realizes that because he has amnesia that he won't remember all that terrible stuff. And Peter struggles with that, and you kind of see that in that scene where Peter makes a choice where he chooses to not tell Harry the truth.
Right. He's like, you know what? Let's see if we can just kind of start over here.
Yeah. So they find out Harry has amnesia. After that, where do we go into? So Harry has amnesia.
Well, my next note just says Mary Jane is a bitch, so I'm pretty sure the next scene has to do with Mary Jane going to visit Peter, and he's totally nice, and she is just a complete bitch to him,
right.
Yes.
which is a nonstop theme in this movie. She is the worst girlfriend ever. I know this is supposed to be based off the previous movies, so like, you know, they have this relationship that was previously built up, But as a standalone movie, it absolutely does not work. It just seems like he's dating this chick that has all these problems and is really mean to him.
The review.
Oh,
They hated it. They hated me.
well, they can't hate you.
The young Miss Watson is a pretty girl. Easy on the eyes, but not on the ears. Her small voice didn't carry past the first row.
That's ridiculous. I was right there.
You were in the first row.
Yeah, that's... Listen, you were great. That's a critic. This is something you're gonna have to get used to. Believe me, I know. Spider-Man gets attacked all the time.
This isn't about you. This is about me. It's about my career.
I know, and I'm just saying you can't let it bring you down. You just gotta believe in yourself, and you pull yourself together, you get right back on the horse, and...
Don't give me the horse thing.
And she is the polar opposite, in my opinion, of Mary Jane from the comics. Like, the entire time she's either being really meek and basically begging for attention, or she's being really upset. And the Mary Jane I recall from the Spider-Man comics, at least from when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, where she was this super confident, you know, the go get him tiger thing was always her being confident, not Peter. That was her trying to make Peter confident.
Right. He says that to her at one point.
Right. And it was kind of a reference to what is supposed to be her tagline, you know. And she's the chick that Peter sees doing cartwheels on the playground in the high school, you know. I mean, she's this really adventurous, like, go get him type girl.
Oh, look at her. She's randomly doing cartwheels. Right. Hello there.
You know, but I think they made Kirsten Dunst Mary Jane is constantly just like oh, I'm so
mopey.
sad. Yeah, mopey and like, you know, I need just constant me time, but you need to be there too, and I'm also going to flirt with Harry a lot.
You don't understand, Peter. You don't understand.
So I think they have a little scene with the two of them, whatever, arguing or her just being mean to Peter, and then it goes on to the Gwen Stacy. So we get introduced to Gwen Stacy a little bit later. That's one of the next scenes that comes up. Her introduction is her doing like a photo shoot, I think, in a building. And then suddenly the building, through a series of events, comes crashing down. That has nothing to do with villains this time, actually. Just bad shit just happens in New York. Like a crane will just like smash into a building and, you know, kill everyone, presumably, if not for Spider-Man. What do you guys think about that whole part?
I thought it was ridiculous how the crane continually attacked the building. It didn't just fall into the building or like take out a portion of it. It was spinning. So it hit the building several times.
That crane was going after her, man. It had a vendetta. It was getting revenge for something, man.
Yeah, it was Attack of the Crane. So it was weird how it attacked multiple times.
What do you think about the whole crane scene, Steve?
Well, it's just like, here's how we introduce Gwen Stacy, right? Like, here's an excuse for action and to introduce a new character at the same time. And like Gwen's another one. I have a feeling like Sam Raimi's just a misogynist or something. He doesn't treat his female characters very well, you know? Because Gwen's another one. She's got all this depth, and her father's the police chief, and her and Peter have this whole thing when he's not with Mary Jane. And instead, in the movies, in all of them, but in this one particularly, she's just relegated to being this pretty blonde that Peter's sort of interested in for a minute.
Someone's going to take that the wrong way, and this is going to be in the internet that Sam Raimi's a misogynist.
I don't think it's gender specific. I think he treats all his characters that way in this movie.
It is true. Sam Raimi, please don't sue me. I'm not claiming anything.
Well, on that topic, during that scene, we get introduced to Edward Brock Jr.
Edward Brock Jr.
Because he's taking photographs of this whole thing, right? So his girlfriend's up there, whatever, getting attacked by a crane. And he starts snapping some photos, and the police chief, who's Gwen Stacy's dad.
James Cromwell.
Right, there he is. Here we are 20 minutes in. So he's watching, and Eddie Brock is taking photos, and he says something like, oh, hey, I'm dating your daughter.
Edward Brock Jr. I work at the Daily Bugle. And I'm dating your daughter.
It's really out of nowhere. This is the introduction to Eddie Brock Venom.
That. Like, they never come back to it, and just never relevant again, really, almost at all. Like, except for a little tiny bit, like for 2 seconds later. Like,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a weird.
The thing is, too, Eddie Brock, when he's watching all this, he does not seem concerned at all. He doesn't seem upset or worried. That's his girlfriend up there. That's like in a building that's, you know, presumably going to collapse, or at least the floor that they're on is going to collapse. And he's like, "Oh, hi, I'm Edward Brock Jr. I'm dating your daughter."
Edward Brock Jr. I work at the Daily Bugle. And I'm dating your daughter.
And he just starts snapping photos of this thing from the ground level.
That's definitely weird. But when you put it like that, I would give that a little bit of credit, because thinking about that now, I think that's meant to show how much of a psychopath he is, or how he has no empathy or emotions, which is why he was a good fit for Venom. I think that kind of shows how much of a void of emotions.
On record, Alan thinks that Topher Grace is a good fit for Venom.
No,
I do not endorse this.
That's more
Not-
depth
not
than
the
I've
actor,
ever heard
his-
attributed to that role.
Not the
You
actor,
are
his
giving this
character.
too much credit, man.
Right?
His character in the film, not the actor.
I don't think he's like a psychopath. I think he's just a huge douchebag.
Yeah. That's
Okay,
always
so,
super-
but
yeah.
they were, okay, all right. They were trying to make him come off as a psychopath, but he just came off as a douchebag.
Oh, hey, you're the police chief. I'm Eddie Brock. I'm a photographer. I'm dating your daughter. Now the audience knows everything about me, and I'm way more concerned about my pictures than I am about your daughter / my girlfriend. See you later. Like,
It's Eddie Brock Jr.
In and out. No, it's Edward Brock Jr.
Brock.
He is not Eddie Brock in this
Edward
movie. He's
Brock.
Edward Brock Jr.
Okay.
It's Brock, sir. Edward Brock Jr.
He even introduces himself to God that way later on.
yes.
Which we'll get to.
We have no
Not there
context
yet.
for who Edward Brock Sr. was, but
So after all that, Mary Jane gets fired. My note says Mary Jane gets fired. She sucks.
Okay.
Right?
she does.
Yeah, she does. I
Her
mean,
singing was all dubbed, obviously.
So she gets fired.
yeah, she gets fired. And this happens right as Spider-Man gets the key to the city. So I guess that's supposed to be like the juxtaposition. Like, his life is going really good, and her life is just going in the toilet. He gets the key to the city, and he kisses Gwen Stacy for some reason while he's getting it. And that's minutes after she's fired. Now, as this is all going down, so she just got fired, and she's watching Peter get the key to the city. The Sandman shows up. Did we even talk about how he got his powers and all that?
Yeah, I mentioned it was weird how that started. So I guess we can get to that now.
Yeah.
So they first show, like, in a big field, like presumably in the middle of nowhere, which is just right outside the city. They show a big field and that spinning, like, vortex machine.
Yeah, he's running from the cops, and he kind of like stumbles into it.
Yeah, which is weird too. He kind of just stumbles into it. Like, there's no security, or this isn't very secure. I don't know any scientific facility where you could just, like, stumble into.
Right.
Except that one.
So yeah, that happens a little bit earlier actually. So he kind of stumbles into the science experiment. There's like a sand vortex, and the scientists are monitoring it, and they say like, "Oh, there's some kind of life form that has appeared," and they're like, "Oh, it's just a bird. It'll fly away."
Yeah.
The world can use one less bird.
I've got a bone to pick with pigeons, so.
Yeah, their lack of concern for this supposedly huge scientific test, and they never explain what that test is. They never make any reference to what they're doing, what it's for. They just show this machine and, oh, they're doing some kind of huge scientific test.
Take the west side. Tom, take the east. Where'd he go?
That's a discharge.
Right. Donnie, we got a little fluctuation on one.
There's a change in the silicon mass.
It's probably a bird. It'll fly away when we fire it up.
Initiating demolecularization.
Yeah, what's your take on that, Steve? That whole like thing that Sandman walks into.
It looks like a giant like mixer, like a Cuisinart mixer that you'd use to like make stuff with. I don't know what it's doing. It's got like sand in it. Somehow he fuses with the sand. It's a very weird thing. Alan's point, I think, is well taken. It's like there's no fencing, there are no alarms, there's no cameras. They're doing some kind of highly volatile experimentation here involving this huge machine that does God knows what. It can clearly turn people into sand humans somehow. And there's no effort made at all to keep people out. And then when they discover something is in it, they don't even bother to verify what it is. They're just like, it's a bird. Don't worry about it.
just turn it to sand.
Right? They don't even have a security. They could have. It was as easy as just having a security monitor they could look at. But no.
One camera, like, so you can see what's in there.
Is it possible it's not a bird and it's a human man? Yes. And then he presses on.
Right. No, it could be a deer. It could be a Chevrolet that just drove in. We have no idea. It's something. You know.
Which then proceeds to turn him into the Sandman. You have a whole about 2-minute scene where it shows his whole body fusing with the sand as the machine turns on, which again furthers the point is, what was the original point of this machine?
Yeah.
If he was not in there, it's just going to spin around the sand? Like what?
Apparently to make unsuspecting former escaped inmates into sand people. I mean, it's another one. It feels like the plot point was there for convenience. Like, how do we turn this guy into a Sandman? Right. I don't know. Build some kind of machine he can fall into. We don't even need to explain what it is.
Science. That's how.
Yeah, science.
So he becomes a Sandman, which basically means he's like a regular man, except he can turn into sand. And he can fly. So he can turn into a flying cloud of sand. He can turn into a giant sand creature. Anything about sand, that's him, man.
How does it propel itself?
The sand cloud?
Yeah.
I have no idea. But it just it shows up as Spider-Man's getting the key to the city. So it just kind of flies in and robs a bank.
I remember Steve bringing up a very good point about that, is that the sand can fly and the powers are very inconsistent.
Yeah.
Like you just said, how does it propel itself? Like sand... Okay, he's made of sand, but now all of a sudden the sand can fly too?
When he can collect more sand to like rebuild parts that have been knocked away, like he gets his head knocked partly off at one point and he just dips his head in like a sandbox and collects more head for himself. It's very weird.
Right. Now this guy, the Sandman guy, apparently he's the one that took out Uncle Ben, right? So
yeah.
In the first movie...
Total retcon.
Yes. Spider-Man's uncle was killed by this thief that died in the first movie. But in this movie, it's explained, no, it was actually that guy's partner, who is the Sandman, that killed Uncle Ben, right? So that's kind of explained in a series of flashbacks, and the police take Peter and Aunt May, and they take him to the police station and let him know what actually happened.
The first flashback, I guess we're already spoiling the movie, but the first flashback tricks you. And it actually kind of got me, because it makes it seem like he did it on purpose, or he was doing it maliciously.
He just shot him in cold blood.
Yeah. Yeah, which is what they show in the flashback, at least the first flashback. You find out later there's the second one. But the first one shows him just murdering him in cold blood.
When they do the first one, doesn't the first one happen immediately after Peter finds out that this guy was really the killer of Uncle Ben? Because my memory is of having the impression that first fantasy was actually, that first flashback wasn't really a flashback. It was Peter imagining the way that it happened.
Yeah, I think you might be right, actually.
And then later in the film, he gets corrected, and he's like, "Oh, actually, you didn't just do this on purpose."
Well, yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah. Well, Sandman shows up and he fights Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Sandman gets away. It's a little bit of a stalemate. You guys remember that, where basically he's like, making giant fists of sand and punching him, and I don't remember exactly why he was there in the beginning. I think it was to rob a bank.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I've forgotten too. He's boring.
Yeah, he sucks. Anyway, Sandman gets away. It's around this point where we're introduced to the symbiote. Well, not introduced. It comes up a little bit earlier, actually. It's on a meteor that falls onto Earth that just goes in Spider-Man's bag or something in the beginning of the movie.
It attaches itself to his scooter's license plate. And
right.
And it forms a V, which is supposed to preview the Venom thing.
Yes.
And isn't it convenient? There's like 9 million people in New York City, and this thing happens to land 50 feet from Spider-Man.
Right. A meteor lands, it hops on his little scooter, and we forget about it. I did.
Right.
I forgot it was there, because it doesn't show up till, I don't know, halfway in.
Way later.
They never mentioned it, and this is just what I'm thinking, but you could argue that, like, it's somehow, since it's like a living thing, it's somehow, like, attracted to him, or it knew where to go, or it could sense
like
Spider-Man was different. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I guess you could make that argument, but that's whatever.
Yeah. So the symbiote just shows up on Spider-Man, and he wakes up, and he's in like a black suit. You guys remember that? He's asleep. The symbiote kind of crawls on top of him, And next thing he knows is he's attached to a building in a black suit, and he's like, where did this come from? And he's like doing backflips on the side of a building.
Emo Spider-Man.
Yeah. Well, that's the beginnings of it anyway.
Yeah.
So he uses the black suit for a little bit, but then he gets rid of it. But we'll cover that in a bit. So what does he do when he has that black suit? He fights Sandman again?
He fights Sandman again in another scripted kind of similar fight with a lot of cuts where they go back and forth, and he gets the upper hand this time because he has the black suit, so he's more powerful.
And he discovers his weakness, which is water.
Yeah.
Right.
He ends up breaking one of the main pipes, and it floods the whole tunnel. And then you see Sandman start dissolving, and presumably Spider-Man has defeated Sandman with the help of his new suit.
Right. He like breaks open a pipe and bursts him with this huge blast of water, and he starts to like disintegrate. Yeah.
Kind of weird though, because he turns into like Mudman in the transition, and sand doesn't turn into mud when you get it wet. You know.
It's just like wet sand.
Yeah. You know, I mean, anyone who's been to the beach knows that.
His one weakness is the beach.
Should have blasted him with the water and made him into a sandcastle.
Sandcastle man.
Oh yeah, he would have been even more powerful. So he thinks Sandman is dead. You remember he visits Aunt May and he's like, Spider-Man killed Uncle Ben's real killer.
Yeah, that was a weird scene. I think we all kind of immediately laughed at that because it's weird that that's what he calls her or invites her over for. Hey, Spider-Man killed him. And when she's not as thrilled, or I don't know what he expected her to react, but when she's not immediately thrilled, he starts to get upset. But it's weird that, like, you just told her that.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that's like the introduction to the side effect the black suit's having, right? Because it's supposed to be... They're very vague about it, I think, in the way they approach the movie, but it's supposed to be making him more violent and angrier.
Yeah, it's definitely supposed to be doing that. And we'll get to that in a little bit. There's an important thing that happens around here. It might have been before that part.
Right.
But he goes to dinner with Mary Jane.
Right.
And he intends to propose.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so he sets up this whole dinner, and he's going to have like the waiter bring out the ring that Aunt May gave him in the beginning of the movie. And Gwen Stacy shows up and kind of throws a monkey wrench into it. Right. Do you guys remember that part, Alan?
Yeah.
Yeah, when he starts talking to Gwen Stacy just to get... God, I'm blanking out.
Well, she shows up and she's like, "Oh, hey, it's me, Gwen Stacy
Yeah.
from your chemistry class or whatever."
Yeah.
And she like has her hand on his shoulder or something, and Mary Jane is getting super jealous at this point. Plus, he kissed her when he was Spider-Man. You remember that?
Yeah.
So he's gonna propose, but she basically is like, "I don't want to. I'm not in a good mood," or she calls off the dinner for something. I think she's mad about the Gwen thing. Do you remember why she walks out?
Yeah, I believe it's post-kiss, and she confronts Peter about it and says, you know, that was our kiss. Because it's the same kiss that they had between the two of them in the first film.
Right.
He's hanging upside down, and she pulls the mask off. Sorry.
She's also upset Peter didn't tell her about Gwen Stacy, but his response is that she's just a girl in my class.
Right.
But Mary Jane's upset because of that.
Hi, my parents and I were just having dinner here.
Oh.
Hello, I'm Gwen Stacy.
This is Mary Jane Watson.
Oh, it's so nice to finally meet you. Pete talks about you all the time. Oh?
Gwen is my lab partner in Dr. Connor's class.
Pete's something of a genius. I'd be completely lost without him. Which actually reminds me, Pete, if you've got a picture of my kiss with Spider-Man, could you bring it to class? I'd really love it. For my portfolio. After all, who gets kissed by Spider-Man, right? I can't imagine. Well, it was lovely to meet you. Good night.
Good night.
There's another Easter egg in that because their professor is Doc Connors, who later becomes the Lizard. Was supposed to become the Lizard.
Right. I think he's either in all three or this one and two.
At least in the second and third, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's the one who's... Peter gives him a sample of the symbiote, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't really go anywhere with him, but maybe it's just to kind of, give us a taste of him for a future installment.
I think that was another one, yeah. They were supposed to use him in a later film that they just didn't get to.
Right. At this point, I think this is where Spider-Man starts becoming pretty much an asshole. The black suit, it starts kind of, I don't know, making him want to change his hairstyle and dance around like a dickhead.
He does the emo hair, and it's black now. His hair goes very jet black, where it wasn't before.
Right.
He yells at the apartment guy about the door.
Yeah.
Rent?
Not now.
Listen, it's a free country. It's not rent-free country.
Leave me alone.
Give me rent.
You'll get your rent when you fix this damn door!
A lot of people describe him as emo during this whole thing, but I think it's just the emo hair. He's mostly just a dickbag.
Right.
I mean, he's not like listening to Taking Back Sunday or doing like emo things like shopping at Hot Topic or anything. He's not emo per se, but that's I guess the easy way to describe him. He has the hair, you know. He's got he's got bangs.
Ever adopt a vampire name? That's true. So
yeah. Emo might be a little strong, but he is doing asshole-ish things, right? So he's kind of like mean to people around him and stuff.
But he starts to like it, you know, because everything's going great. He has more confidence. So he's a douchebag, but he likes it, and everything's going great for him, even though he's a jerk.
And then since Mary Jane stormed out, she went to go hang out with Harry to, I guess, confide in her friend. And this is my most memorable part of the movie for me for some reason, which is when Mary Jane and Harry are having like a cooking montage.
Omelets.
Yeah. So she comes over to be comforted by Harry, and he tells Bernard to go get some food. Which, to me, I always thought, like, go get takeout. I'm going to have dinner with my friend.
Or make something, whatever.
But it shows them cooking. So maybe he just got groceries, but...
They have a 90-second conversation, the point of which is Bernard go get food.
Bernard!
Yes, Mr. Osborne?
We're having a guest. Can you get some food?
A guest?
Yeah, a guest.
A guest? Guest?
Yeah, a guest.
A guest?
Yeah, a guest.
A guest? Guest?
Can you get some food?
Guest.
Will you just get some food?
Right away, sir.
Franco and then the next cut is like we're making omelets in the kitchen. Like, Bernard didn't do anything. He's just like, here's the fridge. You figure it out later.
In the scene, Franco even mentions it twice and kind of raises his voice the second time. He's like, just go get food.
Will you just get some food?
Yeah.
Look, I got you raw eggs.
I hate this scene. So they have a stupid cooking montage.
Yes.
There's like this dance music playing. They're dancing in the kitchen. It's so dumb. It's short, but I just hate it. Like, it's
an unnecessary scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another cliche. I mean, it's been used so many times. Like the couple ends up in the kitchen and something danceable comes on the radio, and they end up dancing with each other romantically while they're making dinner in the kitchen. It's a way to steal it from 6 other movies.
Right. Yeah. Spider-Man 3. That's where I want to see that.
Right.
You know?
Clearly, the kind of movie you take your date to really connect with them. You know.
Yeah.
Did you identify with the Venom story, sweetie?
What Venom story?
Right. What was it? 3 minutes of it?
I don't even know. Have we mentioned him yet? No. I mean, oh no, he hasn't appeared yet. Yeah. So they have their stupid fucking dancing cooking montage,
and they kiss, I believe. And it ends up with her. Yeah. When.
Oh yeah, that's right.
When they kiss, and then it ends up with them. We're both sorry.
And she walks out, and he's like,
she walks out on him.
He does this half-hearted. No, wait, forgive me. That line is delivered so poorly. I'll edit it in if I can.
Sorry.
Me too.
I didn't mean to do that.
No, it's okay. Please, forgive me.
So, yeah, she leaves, and what do we got next?
That's when we go to Peter, because now that he's a jerk and he has the suit, he ends up ousting Edward Brock Jr. for the photo.
It's Brock, sir. Edward Brock Jr.
Because remember, Brock
so
has the photo of
Let's
Spider-Man.
give that some context.
Right.
Why don't you go ahead, Alan?
So, from what I remember, J.K. Simmons?
J.K. Simmons, yeah.
J.K.
J.
Simmons.
Jonah Jameson. Triple J.
Triple J.
J.K. playing J.K.
Wanted a picture of Spider-Man performing like a crime, Because he was saying that it's not enough now to get pictures of Spider-Man. He needs a picture of him doing something or getting caught in the act.
Right.
So he makes it seem like that's the big prized photo.
Yeah, like Spider-Man getting high or something like
or stealing, or Spider-Man, yeah.
Like tagging
hitting
a wall.
Yeah. Michael Phelps status. Here's Spider-Man at a party hitting a bong.
Yeah. Elon Musk.
I want the public to see Spider-Man for the two-bit criminal he really is. He's a fake. He's full of stickum. Catch him in the act. Spider-Man with his hand in a cookie jar. Whoever brings me that photo gets a job. What are you waiting for? Chinese New Year? Go, go, go.
I'm on it, boss.
Which leads into the scene we're talking about where Brock comes up with the photo and he shows Jameson. He's like, hey, I have the photo. Here it is. Here's Spider-Man caught in the act.
That's right. So he has like a doctored photo of Spider-Man doing something, which I don't even know what the photo is. It's like him lifting up a cop car or something. But it's a doctored photo.
Yeah.
And he gives it to J. Jonah Jameson. He's like, yes, this is perfect. You got the job. Mm-hmm. Right? So that was the big reward for bringing in that kind of photo, was you get like a permanent office job instead of being like a freelance photographer, which is what he is, as well as Peter.
Mm-hmm. So then Peter, in the moment, being the dick and he has the powers, or he's getting more confident, chooses to show Jameson that it's a fake. So he shows him like with another picture he has that it's a fake, and he proves it like indefinitely. Whatever.
Yeah, definitively, I think.
Definitively.
Either way, yeah, right. He proves it's a fake photo, and Eddie Brock gets fired from the Bugle, and he's also, I guess, discredited. They don't really go over that in the movie, but that's the intention. Like, he's now a discredited photographer, and he won't be able to get a job anywhere.
No one in the town will hire him.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll never get hired in this town again, Brock.
You'll never work in this town again, kid.
Like, his whole life is ruined. He has no other option. That was just completely devastating.
You could have been a star.
You were going right to the top, kid, until this. Peter's supposed to typically be an honest person. I think it's weird that the dick move in this context is supposed to be him telling Jameson that he just bought fake photographs. Like, I guess I can perceive why, from Eddie's point of view, it would seem like the dick thing to do, but from Peter's end of things, I think that's what Peter would do anyway. Like,
right.
You just paid for fake photos of Spider-Man.
Brock was just wrong.
Right?
Like, he shouldn't have done that. Like, but Peter's the jerk for
saying
pointing
something.
that out, yeah.
To the point where Brock's reaction, which I'm sure we'll discuss momentarily, is just insane.
Right.
Utterly insane.
We're going to get to it in a moment.
Right.
Before that happens, actually, Peter goes to a jazz club with Gwen Stacy, Bryce Dallas Howard, and who is working there, Alan?
At the club. Oh, Mary Jane.
Right.
So Mary Jane's a waitress,
slash singer
that Peter didn't know she got fired. At this point, he just finds out.
He knew that she worked there, I think. I think the intention was he was going to go there to show off his new hot date and to make her jealous or something and punch her in the face, which does happen.
Which leads into the whole montage where he jumps onto the stage and takes over the piano and does the whole dance, and the spotlights come on, and
yeah, he does this weird thing where he's on his date and he's like trying to impress both his date and Mary Jane, I think. And he like interrupts her singing. Like, it's so weird. He starts like playing the piano randomly. She's about to sing and he starts playing the piano. And then he starts dancing and everyone in the club's kind of like watching him, thinking he's really cool, and it's really corny and kind of cringy.
It's super cringy.
Which is weird because now Venom lets you know how to play the piano.
Yeah.
That's not
Somehow.
explained.
Right? Well, it's his Marty McFly moment. He gets to get up at the dance and play for everybody.
Right.
Except it's not nearly as endearing as anything about Back to the Future.
Oh, not at all. So for some reason, he's about to get kicked out of this club. I think he's like, him and Mary Jane start having words, and then the bouncer's like, "We got a problem here," and he's like, "Get out of my face!" And he pummels the bouncer, and then Mary Jane comes up to stop him, and he backhands her in the face, and she's like looking up at him. Yeah, like, what have you done? And then he realizes I've become a monster. The symbiote has turned me into a monster.
Can I help you, sir? No.
Is everything okay here, Paul?
Yeah. Everything okay here, Paul? Take him out of here.
Let's go, sir.
Take your hand off of me.
Now.
Okay. Hey,
Who are you?
I don't know.
If Peter's supposed to be super strong, I mean, maybe like within the context of the comic universe, perhaps not as strong as somebody like Juggernaut. But don't you think if he's off the rails, so to speak, and is just willy nilly hitting people at that rate, like wouldn't he be like breaking people's heads?
Oh yeah, he would have took her head off for
Right?
sure. I mean, it is really messed up that he hit his girlfriend, but it's just seems strange that it took him to get up to this point to realize that the symbiote is turning him into this thing. I think I would have thought he saw the signs earlier, but this is when he's like, okay, I got to get rid of this stuff because it's turning me into something I don't want to be. So he goes into a church, right?
Which is a weird choice. Your first choice is to go to a church.
Isn't that where you go when you want to change? Where do you go? You go to an Arby's, like.
No positive change has ever happened inside an Arby's.
Right. I've regretted it every time.
Every time.
You know what? I really like Arby's. They're not even paying me to say this. I actually do.
But they should be.
But yeah, a lot of regrets for sure.
Okay. So Peter goes to a church, and just as it happens to be, that's where Brock shows up as well.
How convenient.
How convenient.
Right. So Peter's up at like near the top of the church tower, like where the big bell is ringing. He's trying to get this symbiote off him because of what it's turning him into. Eddie Brock is in the church for another reason. Why is Eddie Brock in the church, Steve?
Eddie Brock has chosen to visit church so that he can politely yet firmly request that Jesus murder Peter Parker on his behalf. Which, I mean, who hasn't been there before? You know, you get to the point where you're like, Jesus, would you please just murder this other person? 'Cause I'd really like it. And my reason for wanting it is that they busted me doing something wrong.
Right. And Brock doesn't even say please.
No.
He says, I want you to
really
kill. Like,
want you to
he's
do this.
asking God, like, who are you? I want you, God, to kill this guy. Like, because I'm asking you to.
It's Brock, sir. Edward Brock, Jr. I come before you today, humbled and humiliated, to ask you for one thing. I want you to kill Peter Parker.
Right. So Peter had a hand in discrediting him as a photographer. So what he wants now is for God to kill Peter. Okay.
And there's a great scene, like a couple seconds, where they cut to a picture of Jesus on the cross. And in that religion, that's like one of the most sacred parts of that whole thing is that Jesus was nailed to a cross. And they show that to prove like the intensity. So they show Jesus nailed to a cross, and then it's Brock praying to kill Peter Parker, which is just ridiculous.
Brock, by the way, seems not upset in the least that his girlfriend is clearly more interested in Peter than in him. It's another, second instance of the movie of him basically saying, like, yeah, I'm dating her, but I don't care, whatever.
No, he really doesn't. I think they only had a brief dating history because he says he's going to ask her to marry him, yet later in the movie, she says, like, we had 2 dates or something like that, or 1 date even. Like,
right.
So he's really jumping the gun. This guy is all over the place.
He's that confident.
Yeah.
So while Brock's praying to God to kill Peter Parker, Peter is at the top of the tower and discovers that Venom, he's weak to sound, or how would you put that?
Yeah, the bell up there in the church is ringing really loud next to Peter, and it's clearly making the symbiote, like, detach itself from Peter. Like, it's
his weakness.
Yeah, it's his weakness, like sound, essentially, like high frequency sound or loud sound, whatever it may be in this movie. But yeah, that's how he gets it off. He eventually tears the symbiote off of him, and he gets out of there, which causes the symbiote to go down from the top of the church, and it finds its way down to Eddie Brock, who had just witnessed the tail end of this. So he saw that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Brock saw that. It falls onto him, and Brock ends up becoming consumed very fast by the whole symbiote. And the weirder part about this whole scene is that after you see Brock become Venom, essentially, it takes him over very fast, and then you see Peter at the top, who no longer has the suit. The scene just cuts. They don't explain.
And Peter's up there naked.
Yeah.
Like, that suit was his clothes. He didn't have a shirt on underneath it, so he's naked up there.
And this is kind of an inconsistent thing, because when he first combines with the symbiote crawls over his suit and makes it seem like what it's done is just affix itself to an existing Spider-Man suit. So when he sloughs it off with the bell, why does it take the whole suit with him? Shouldn't it have just bled its way out the way it bled its way in?
Yeah,
and
you would think so.
And then when it gets to Eddie, it just goes through the clothing and attaches itself directly to his skin.
His body, rather than like a
Which is the way it was supposed to work in the comics.
Right. These inconsistencies are very strange.
Yeah.
I don't know why they just didn't have it come off of him, but him have clothes. Maybe him ripping it off and having nothing underneath is like a more dramatic effect.
Right.
But he had to get home naked.
Yeah. Which they never explain, or how Brock got out.
I mean,
of
he
the
presumably just web swung his way home,
right,
completely nude.
It's another convenience. In the comics, he needed the web guns on his wrists. And
yeah,
in the
he has
movies,
the
he's got the little
organic
slits.
Yeah.
It was also weird that after Brock became Venom, that he didn't attack Spider-Man, or they didn't fight. They were that close, and the symbiote knew where he was because he came off him, but they never show him fighting. Like, it's just Venom just leaves. They both just part ways.
Yeah.
Nobody really reacts in this movie to having this thing attached to them. I mean, it's always just like this 10 seconds of, whoa, what's this? And they're used to it. Like, there's never this, oh my God, why is this black living alien thing like attached to me?
Yeah, I'm cool with it.
Right? Yeah, whatever. It's good.
So that scene abruptly ends. They never fight. Peter goes home naked. Venom just leaves.
Yeah,
we don't
and
know
Venom
what
goes.
happens.
Well, later on, he encounters Sandman. Like another thing that's just out of the blue. So Venom is just like swinging through the alleys, like web swinging. You see this. You see his shadow, and then he just gets punched by Sandman. So Sandman was either just like waiting in an alley until he saw Spider-Man, or was tracking down Venom, thinking it's Spider-Man.
Like, pick the one alley in New York he would happen to bump into Spider-Man with.
Right.
It's a
Spider-Man alley.
Spider-Man alley, yeah. Oh, is that how it got its name?
Oh my God. So Venom makes a proposition to Sandman. Now, this is where we see full-fledged Venom. And this Venom, how does he look, Steve, compared to comic book Venom?
It's weird. He's got this, like, anybody that remembers what the Koopa Troopers looked like in the Super Mario Brothers movie with John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins, you got a pretty good idea of what the head on Venom looks like. It's very flat. It's got this weird, sharp, angular teeth. Even in the comics, I've never understood why Venom gets a second set of teeth. When the symbiote takes over Eddie's head, you'd think one set would be sufficient, or where they came from. Yeah, he's very, very strange.
Yeah, human teeth aren't good enough for eating people, I don't think.
I guess, it's probably true.
Venom's also supposed to be much larger.
Yeah, that's the one big distinction I noticed when I watched this movie versus... I mean, I saw the Venom movie that's out right now recently.
Topher's such a diminutive Eddie Brock. You're right, he should be this big Hulk dude.
Right. I always referred to him as Tiny Venom. Like,
right.
His face kind of looks like Venom, and the suit kind of looks like Venom, but it's just like a tiny version of Venom.
Yeah. Venom Jr.
And he purportedly...
Edward Brock Jr., sir?
Right. And he supposedly put on a bunch of muscle to be in the movie, and it's just like, no, you look like Eric Foreman.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Right.
You're telling me Topher Grace claims to have gotten buff for this movie?
Or at least slightly
I need
buffer.
some evidence of that, man. He was straight out of that 70s show.
Yeah.
He just walked off set of that 70s show onto this movie.
Basically the truth, right? Yeah. I think, well, in fairness to him, he might have been like 82 pounds when he quit being Eric Foreman and like 97 pounds. When he
Right.
started being Eddie Brock. So for him, it was a big jump.
He ate an ice cream cone. Oh, man, I've gained so much weight.
Except, again, in the comic, Venom's supposed to be pretty beefy. He's like
big
big.
dude.
Like big.
I mean, and that's how he's depicted everywhere. The comics, the video games, anywhere he's depicted. And especially like McFarlane's the first version of him. He's supposed to be this big, imposing creature. It's part of what made him so scary with the symbiote on.
Has the ability to change his size as well. Can he?
The symbiote is a little flexible. It seems to be able to like create extensions off of Eddie's body to some degree. But
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it can increase the size.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, so way too small. That's a big problem.
Yeah, he looks horrible, and he sounds like Topher Grace. That's another huge problem with Venom. He does not sound intimidating. He does not look intimidating. He's just like, it's just Topher Grace. Besides, mostly when you see him, he pulls back the Venom mask, and you just see Topher Grace.
Right.
With sharp teeth.
Hey, Parker.
My God, Eddie.
Ooh, my spider sense is tingling. If you know what I'm talking about.
Which is like, okay, you're just a guy that is, I don't know, kind of dorky, I guess.
Yeah.
Does this suit?
I mean, I can say that as a guy that's kind of dorky. We can smell our own. So, yeah, they make an agreement to kill the spider, is the way they put it, right? So they're going to take on Spider-Man together. I don't know why necessarily. Venom hasn't tried to attack Spider-Man by himself, so it's not like he's tried and failed. He's never tried, but he wants some outside help. So they agree to fight Spider-Man. That's where it gets to the kind of the big finale. And the finale is Venom kidnaps Mary Jane. He's holding her up on top of a building, and he's basically calling out Spider-Man. All the citizens in New York are watching. It's on the news. There's a very noteworthy British reporter that's announcing this, and she also always stuck out to me for some reason.
Just 30 minutes ago, police came across this startling sight. A young woman held hostage in a taxi suspended 80 stories above the ground in what appears to be a giant web.
But they have this big finale where Venom calls out Spider-Man, and what does Spider-Man do before he goes there, Steve?
God, what is the last thing he does before he goes over there?
He talks to Harry.
Right.
Oh,
He
that's
asks
right.
Harry to help him.
Yeah, he goes and makes good with Harry, but Harry has only decided to forgive him because Bernard, the butler, who has apparently been sitting on this information for like 2 years, finally tells Harry that, oh yeah, by the way, I cleaned up your father's wounds the night he died, and it was his sled and his weapon that killed him, not Spider-Man.
If I may, sir, I've seen things in this house I've never spoken of.
What are you trying to tell me?
The night your father died, I cleaned his wound. The blade that pierced his body came from his glider. I know you're trying to defend your father's honor, but there's no question that he died by his own hand. I loved your father as I have loved you, Harry, as your friends love you.
We just get some food?
Right, so Harry thinks Spider-Man killed Norman Osborn,
Right.
but it was actually Norman Osborn who kind of killed himself.
Yeah.
Not intentionally, but
Right.
trying to kill Spider-Man, he accidentally killed himself.
And Peter, knowing this is his friend's father, was trying not to have him end up dead. You know, and so, but why? Why does Bernard sit on this information? He knows
Until
that
now.
Harry is this obsessed, deranged individual. He's treating himself in this green, misty chemical tank. He's wearing weird costumes and flying around fighting superheroes. He's throwing bombs at people. He's kidnapping women.
Bernard's just like, I'm gonna let this ride out, see how it all plays out.
Maybe if he dies, I'll get the money. I don't know.
But then he decides to tell him the truth.
Finally.
Oh, you know what? We missed something too, because we mentioned Harry got amnesia.
Right.
But it came back to him. His memory came back after that stupid cooking montage.
That's right.
And that's where you get probably my favorite part of the movie is when we get a voiceover from Willem Dafoe, and he's like,
"Oh, right.
You forgot your purpose.
You've taken your eye off the ball. Harry, remember me?"
Yes, Father. I remember.
I was right about her, about Peter, about everything.
You know what you must do. Make him suffer. Make him wish he were dead. First, we attack his heart.
Right.
And then his memory comes back. He's like, that's right, I'm trying to kill Spider-Man. And then he gets Mary Jane to break up with Peter by manipulating them or threatening her or something like that.
Yeah, he gets Mary Jane to break up with Peter, and then goes about this campaign to fight Peter. And Peter's got the symbiote at that point, and he beats Harry up real badly. And that's the last time they see each other. Harry kind of just goes home to lick his wounds after symbiote Spider-Man kicks his butt.
Yeah, beat up real badly. So basically, they fight. And
Right.
Peter ends up throwing a grenade in his face.
Right.
A regular grenade, not
a pumpkin bomb.
not a pumpkin.
And
For the record.
He turns into Return of the Jedi Mark Hamill with a giant scar on his
Right.
face.
So yeah, he has this completely healed scar that looks like it's a scar he got several years ago at this point in the movie.
Yeah,
Even though it should probably be a few day old fresh wound.
He's not even still scabby.
Yeah.
So Peter asks for his help after throwing a grenade at his face.
Yeah. A couple days later, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, Bernard should really feel terrible at that point, because now you've waited so long, he's been maimed in the course of doing what he was out doing. You can stop this.
Bernard kind of stumbles up and he's like, I was going to wait till you lose a limb, but I figure I'll just tell you now.
When I
A
envisioned
grenade to
this,
the face is enough.
I imagined you missing a leg when we had this conversation, but hey, I guess massive facial scarring and burning is sufficient. So
And amnesia.
and all this other
everything else
stuff.
that's happened.
I probably should have gotten the clue that you were this close to getting yourself killed a year and a half ago, but hey.
To be fair, though, I mean, Bernard tells him this information, and then he reluctantly agrees to go help Peter save Mary Jane from what they think is just Venom, but it's actually Venom and the Sandman.
Right.
But that advice didn't play out very well for Harry in the end, so maybe he should have just stayed home.
Probably should have. Yeah.
I made a specific note. So Peter asks Harry for help. Harry basically says no. And then Spider-Man goes on to rescue Mary Jane without Harry. So she's hanging from the building in between a web and a taxi cab, and Venom's there. We don't know the Sandman's there yet until he just shows up. But one note I made is when the police start fighting, there's a whole montage that the police are shooting at the Sandman with their guns. But in the effects, you see the bullet holes hit the Sandman. And the bullet holes are way huge because at this point the Sandman's several stories tall.
Oh, that's right. The police do shoot at Sandman a couple times. That's the only useful thing they attempt to do. They take a couple shots and they're like, this isn't working. Spider-Man will handle it.
Sandman is several stories tall because he turns into the hulking sand creature, which again Steve brought up is inconsistent because now he can just make himself bigger.
Yeah, you can just get giant when you need to.
But when he gets giant and they're shooting him, the effects on the bullet holes for the movie, you can see the bullet holes going through the Sandman, but they're really 9mm rounds, or you wouldn't even see that on a giant sand guy.
Right.
They're making it seem like he's getting hit with cannons. It's just handguns.
Way over exaggerated. Right.
Which a small thing, but I thought was weird.
Yeah, maybe the special effects artist didn't know the size that he was supposed to be in the scene. I didn't realize he's supposed to be a giant.
You guys wanted him huge, right? Because I made him huge.
So he's getting hit with small caliber handguns, but they're somehow making huge holes in his body.
Meanwhile, this whole thing is being announced by this fucking inexplicable British reporter, man.
He seems to have come out of nowhere to answer the prayers of the city, just when all hope seemed to be lost.
She sounds like Rey from Star Wars.
Yeah.
I believe Steve said like South African.
She sounded a little South African to me.
South
I don't know why.
South African.
But she could have
I
been
thought it
English. I
was,
have no
like,
idea.
British.
Right?
I have no idea.
Yeah, that part's also very weird. Is that she's announcing it, and the whole thing, besides the fight, is like a spectacle for the city. It's like an event,
Why
and you
are so
have
many people
police firing their weapons into this large Sandman, which I just mentioned, but everyone's still around watching it. Like there's fire going off,
Right?
and no one seems to care. They keep watching.
There's just this huge crowd watching this giant sand creature and this obviously violent alien thing fight with Spider-Man over a woman. And it's like, why? Why are you all here? Like, the one general rule when superheroes get involved is going to be a lot of collateral damage.
Right,
Buildings
run.
could collapse.
Run away.
Stuff's going to be... You need to not be here.
Yeah.
You can obviously go home and watch this on your TV. So...
But they've like gathered around the building, and it's like a spectacle.
Right.
They're lining up for the big fight. It's like a boxing match, you know. It's like the yearly Spider-Man big fight.
You know, that's something the MCU is missing is like a superhero boxing league. There's no promoter in the Marvel universe that ever thought, you know what people would pay to see is two superheroes have a boxing match.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
Didn't
Right.
they do that in Thor Ragnarok? I didn't see that, but didn't they have them like fight?
Oh yeah,
Didn't
he
the Hulk
fight the
fight
Hulk.
Thor?
Yeah, they had like a
Like,
gladiator
they weren't
ring.
boxing, but they were like fighting.
You're right. So it's been touched on.
Okay.
So during that whole big stupid finale that looks horrible because bad effects, Mary Jane's the hostage, right?
Yeah.
Now she's up on this Venom web on the top of a building, and there's like a taxi up there. Now, do you guys remember this part? She's like falling down from that because she's being held up by web, and it keeps like breaking, and she's falling down to the next level and the next level. And there's like a taxi above her, and it's like she's always like dodging it. It seems like, you know, it's coming down and she like moves out of the way. It comes down and she moves out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous and
Very
cliche.
reminiscent of the original Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Trying to outrun the falling explorer.
Yes,
You know?
exactly.
Also, something they hint at but never mention, or I don't think most people would even catch, is there's all this webbing. That's not Spider-Man's webbing. That's Venom's webbing. They never bother to explain to the audience that after the symbiote left Peter, it kept some of his abilities, and it took the webbing with it. And that's why Venom has them.
Right.
And they just never touched on it. It's just like, here's all this webbing. There's no explanation of how it got there. If you've never read the comics and don't know that, I don't know what you would have thought. Like,
Well, it's Spider-Man. There's webbing. It's
Right.
Venom's a spider.
Right. Why Venom can do the things he does in this are not explained on any level.
Right.
On any level.
You know, I don't think it even occurred to them that some people might wonder where all that webbing had come from
Well,
if it wasn't from Spider-Man.
Sam Raimi clearly had no interest in this character. He
He was
put it
vocal
in
about it.
begrudgingly.
Right.
And he's like, okay, this is what you get. Most expensive movie ever made. There you go.
Second
Maybe.
most
Maybe
expensive.
the second most expensive movie ever made.
Yeah.
We don't
What's
know.
up there? Who cares?
Right?
So, the big twist at the end is while Spider-Man is fighting Venom and Sandman, trying to rescue Mary Jane.
And Harry's also fighting Sandman as well.
But you see Harry come in, like Harry shows up.
Oh,
It's like,
I see.
Like,
Yeah, you're
he
right.
forgave him, you know.
Yeah.
Peter's struggling, and then Harry comes in to help him.
Yeah.
Like, oh, here comes Harry saving the day.
Yeah, and he's back on his flying snowboard, and he's, you know, whatever, throwing not pumpkin bombs, or... Actually, he throws, like, what you think are pumpkin bombs, and they turn into, like, razor blade flying
Kind of like
things.
the Batman boomerang thing.
Batarang.
Yeah, he has, like, batarang.
Batarang, sir. Get that right.
A ridiculous part of that whole scene is once Harry shows up, they're fighting Sandman and Venom, and they fight him for a few minutes. It's back and forth, you know, a lot of cuts. It's very disorientating, similar to all the other fights in the movie. But it ends, or a big part of it is Harry shoots the Sandman with some rockets.
Yeah.
And that, like, brings him down.
Yeah, it seemingly kills him, actually.
Yeah, it seemingly kills him. It's like, yo, you couldn't have done that earlier, and, like, rockets? I thought he's, like, the Sandman.
How do you kill something made of sand?
With rocket, yeah.
I don't understand. And, like, where does internal organs go when he turns into sand?
Oh,
like,
man. All good questions.
But somehow Harry just fires these like 2 rockets. It's like, oh, that's what did it. The Sandman was taken down by rockets.
Yeah.
After fighting for like several minutes. It's like, okay.
Who do you guys think would win, Sandman or Anakin Skywalker?
Well, Anakin Skywalker did kill all the younglings, so he's pretty badass.
Yeah, but I hear he doesn't like sand. I don't know.
Right? Oh, it's true. You know, he definitely has an aversion to sand.
Who would win, Anakin Skywalker or one sandy boy?
Oh man.
Or one guy on a snowboard.
One rocket.
Yeah, one rocket. A snowboard that shoots rockets is what defeats the Sandman.
Where are those rockets on the snowboard? It's like,
Yeah.
isn't it thin like a snowboard?
Yeah, you'd think that he could like load in two, but that would be it. You know, it's got maybe two little cylinders where you can put one each into, but then after he's fired those two, like where are the others coming from?
Well, maybe he just does the two.
Yeah,
I think
it's
that's
just
the way it was
weird.
in the comics, right? He's like the purple torpedo things that were on the bottom of it, and he would just fire them off.
Oh yeah, I had the toy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very anticlimactic.
It is.
It's anticlimactic how they have the huge battle, and then afterwards Harry fires the rockets and he takes down the Sandman.
Right. I don't feel any tension in this scene at all, or really at all in the movie. I don't relate to the characters. I don't care about Spider-Man and Mary Jane's relationship. I don't really want him to save her. Just let them have her and get out of that relationship, man. I mean, this is your chance.
The better, you ever take a minute, the movie's the better part of 2.5 hours long. It's like 2 hours worth of Mary Jane's and Peter's relationship problems and Sandman vaguely referencing this kid who might be sick.
Right.
And then there's like 4 minutes of an actual big fight where two characters end up dead. And like the Venom's almost not even in the film at all, except this anticlimactic climax.
Right.
And then there's like 4 minutes of ending, and that's the end of the movie.
Harry ends up dying, and Venom also dies.
You're right. So Spider-Man figures out Venom's weakness, which is sound, and he just like bangs a bunch of rods, makes high-frequency sounds, and that hurts Venom.
Spider-Man gathers a bunch of pipes and ends up building a ring around Venom.
Yes.
And then when he hits the pipes, the ring vibrates and Venom's surrounded.
Right.
And has nowhere to go. And then that's when he lobs the grenade into the center, and while Venom's weak from the sound, he just blows up, he's gone.
Yeah,
So-
he blows him up. He kills him.
Yeah.
Like, definitively dead. Like, there's nothing left. There's not, like, a little tiny bit of symbiote. There's no little... And there's no Eddie Brock, like, all covered in smoke. Like, you know how they do that in movies? Or, like, someone gets a grenade tossed at them, and they're just, like, all, like, black and ashy, and just, like, coughing, like...
Just like they did with Harry when he threw the grenade at his face.
Right.
Well, you know, the goblins are like 0 for 2 here. 2 straight goblins, father and son. Both of them end up dying. One accidentally by his own sled.
Right.
Like the other
one, Venom kills Harry with his sled, right? His snowboard.
Yeah, pretty much.
So he gets the snowboard. It has like 2 spikes on it, and he just like kind of jams it into his chest, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's very reminiscent of his father getting pinned to the wall at the end of the first one.
Yeah.
And it's like, what an ineffectual group. Somehow Goblin manages to survive through, 20 years worth of comics, but 2 movies was basically all he could drag out.
Oh, yeah. These guys get their asses handed to them.
Right? Now the whole family's dead.
Yeah, and there's just Bernard. Probably inherited everything.
Yeah, laughing his ass off in the background. You know? This is why I didn't say anything all that time.
He's the real villain of the movie.
Right, yeah, the real bad guy. Here's the butler. He wouldn't bring Harry any food.
We just get some food?
He just waited around to say anything about Harry's dad. Like, what an asshole.
Looks like you got another wound to clean, Bernard.
Right? Bernard's like, no, I'm hiring myself.
I ain't cleaning this wound. I'm done.
There's also a very weird scene after Spider-Man kills Venom and he presumably saves the day. Sandman shows up and there's an awkward emotional scene where Spider-Man forgives Sandman for what he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just weird.
That's where we find out the truth, that he didn't just like in cold blood kill Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
He like accidentally shot him. It's weird. So he's trying to steal Uncle Ben's car. His accomplice runs up to him and like startles him, and he accidentally pulls the trigger. So he did kill Uncle Ben. It just wasn't intentionally.
It was accidentally. So you're supposed to feel bad or not as angry because even though he still killed him, it was accidentally. But
Right.
he still killed them. So that's a little weird.
I was pointing a gun at him. I was stealing his car, and I accidentally shot him. What are you gonna do?
Big deal.
Oh, it was an accident. It's fine. I forgive you. Which, yeah, that was a weird scene.
Look, it's a totally normal thing that happens.
Right.
Okay.
I didn't mean to.
Every now and then when I'm stealing a car, I accidentally shoot the guy, you know?
I think the instances of my car theft where somebody didn't get shot were the minority. And it's
Right.
almost always an accident. Like,
So you have to forgive me. Like,
right?
Yeah.
He
Your
doesn't
Honor.
say that, but Spider-Man forgives him anyway, and then he just kind of turns into a puff of sand and flies away again.
Flies away again, where we still don't know why he can fly.
To be seen again in a future movie that won't actually end up getting made.
Yeah, and who knows what they were gonna do with
Well,
him?
he'll
'cause
show up as an ally, maybe.
He just flies away. Like, where is he going? What is he gonna do?
Maybe he's gonna go. He's still got to rob banks to get the money, I guess, to cure his daughter.
Is Spider-Man gonna go fight him again, even though he forgave him? Spider-Man's still like his enemy.
He's gonna go rob banks in a different city, so Spider-Man can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
You know?
He's gonna go to Gotham.
There you go. You can't cross universes like that, man.
Yeah.
It's nerd blasphemy
Yeah,
right there.
This is Marvel. The cities are real. Maybe he'll just go down to Jersey or something.
Oh, a Punisher versus Sandman.
Actually, okay, funny. I remember there was like a Sandman-like character in the animated Batman series. I don't think he was Sand, but there was Clayface.
There was also Clayface, but that's
Clayface.
Batman. That's a Batman character.
But he was kind of like the Sandman, I guess.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, he's like a mud guy.
Clayface, yeah.
I remember that vaguely from Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah.
That was a good series.
It
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Mask of the Phantasm's a classic.
Yeah, next time I'm gonna watch Spider-Man 3, I'll just watch 5 episodes of the animated series instead, because this movie sucked.
Not the MTV Spider-Man. That one was not so good.
MTV Spider-Man?
There was an MTV animated Spider-Man. It was kind of quasi cell shaded, very weird looking. Early 2000s.
I don't remember that at all.
It's a good thing. I wouldn't look it up.
You know what is the? I mean, this is up there, but the worst iteration of Spider-Man I've seen is. Have you guys ever seen a show called The Electric Company?
That sounds familiar. Was that from like the late 70s, early 80s?
Yeah, I think it's from the 70s. It looks kind of like a Sesame Street thing. I never actually saw it, but I saw it online.
You know what? I think I remember my mother putting reruns of that on for me when I was 5 or 6 years old, like in the mid 80s.
Yeah, I think that was like back in the day. I remember that. It was kind of like a Sesame Info.
Yeah,
thing.
it's of that vein, but they have these segments where they do like these Spider-Man skits. They call it Spidey, and it's basically this really poorly done comic book style Spider-Man skit where he fights these really dumb mustache twirler villains, and it's it's just really awful. I mean, it's supposed to be kind of hokey, I think, like, you know, the Adam West Batman, but it's too much for me, man. I did not like it.
Spider-Man 3 was slightly better than that.
Yeah.
Slightly.
Yeah.
But, you know,
At least that has the so bad it's kind of funny aspect. This doesn't. It's just boring, and it's really long, and I hate Mary Jane.
I recall that Roger Corman at one point did a Fantastic Four movie.
Yeah.
And it was actually an official movie where I believe there was also a Spider-Man movie from around the same time, but I think the costume was basically a set of pajamas.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's something maybe marginally better than a set of kids' pajamas sized for an adult, but yeah, very weird one.
I haven't heard of that, but that's the way it looks on the Electric Company for sure.
James Cameron was supposed to direct the Spider-Man films at one point.
Ooh.
Yeah. Right.
Man, JC.
JC.
I like James Cameron's films, at least
Yeah.
most of the ones I've seen, I should say.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of Avatar, though I did like it at the time, just like everyone else.
The tech
Anyone that
behind
says they
making it
didn't lie.
Right. I definitely dug it at the time. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Terminator 2 obviously stands out. The Abyss, I think, still stands out. Getting that film made was super intense. I think it's respectable they even got it finished.
Wasn't it True Lies?
True Lies. It's another classic.
Yeah.
Him and Arnie do well together.
Alan, what do you think about Titanic?
1997's Titanic.
Oh, there it is.
What do I think about Titanic? I will straight up admit my 3 favorite movies, at least recently, and I don't know, maybe it'll change, but I really like Drive, Terminator 2, and Titanic. Titanic is a top 3 movie for me.
I was really hoping you were going to say Memphis Belle, The Phantom, and Titanic because all 3 star Billy Zane.
And then BZ.
Put a cork in it, Billy Zane.
But yeah, Titanic is a classic. Yeah, I really like Titanic. It's a classic movie.
Yeah. It's good. I admit. I watch it when it's on.
I mean, there is like the chick flick aspect of it and the whole romance, but I think it was a really well done movie, and the effects and James Cameron and how he directs. And
the recreation of the ship.
The recreation
is like the most realistic ever. They built like a multi-million gallon water tank with massive like 1/12 scale models. They could recreate it breaking up. It was only partly done in CG. It's crazy that they made that work.
It looks great. It really does.
But that's a whole nother thing. If you want to do a thing on that, absolutely.
Oh yeah, man. We got to do a Titanic episode followed by Titanic 2.
Roger Corman's Titanic too.
Oh yeah. All right, so let's wrap it up. So
Spider-Man 3.
let's give it a rating on any rating scale you want. Let's start with you, Steve.
All right. If 0 is the worst possible film that could have ever been made and 10 is absolute perfection. Like, though, you know, the worst part about it is it wasn't poorly put together. Like, the set design, the costumes, the photography was all pretty much what you'd expect it to be. It was just poorly thought out and executed. I'm gonna say it makes a 5 on the basis of the fact that it wasn't ineptly put together, but is no better than average at best because everything else about it is mediocre.
All right, Alan.
I was going to say on a scale of 1 to 5, I would give it probably a 2 or even 2.5 out of 5, just because of what Steve touched on. None of the story really made sense, but it wasn't poorly shot, and there are some small parts that are kind of entertaining. So as much as we talked about it and all the stuff that doesn't make sense, I think there is just a small bit of merit to it. So I'd give it like a 2 out of 5.
All right. Well, I'm feeling right now a rating scale of thumbs up, thumbs down for me.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good one.
And on that basis, I'm going to give it a thumbs down.
Yeah.
This movie is not good. It's really hard to sit through. I remember enjoying it at the time I saw it in 2007 or 8. I saw it when it came out to DVD, but it was really forgettable for me at the time. I didn't watch it till a few years later, and I just remember thinking, like, how did I sit through this? It's so long. I don't like anyone in this movie. It looks bad as far as the special effects, in my opinion. I know at the time I'm sure they were fine, but I just don't like this movie. There's really nothing about it that I like, with the exception of bringing back Willem Dafoe's voice. That sweet, sweet Willem Dafoe voice.
You know what you must do. Make him suffer. Make him wish he were dead.
There's a good point you touched on that I didn't even think of, that we didn't even bring up, is you have to take into account the time that this movie came out. This movie is going to be 12 years old now. So at the time, it was probably somewhat not as bad, even though it was the same film. I think maybe a lot of our views are just because we saw it almost 12 years later.
I would concede that, like, the effects wouldn't have been as offensive at the time because they would have looked current.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm not sure that by itself would be enough to really make that
Make it
big a
better.
difference.
Let me ask you guys this. What is the best superhero movie of all time?
Oh, God, that's a loaded question.
I love it casually.
Off the top of your head. Let's not go into it too heavily, but I have a point.
Off the top
Off the top of your head, real quick. Quick answer.
Either one of the two Burton Batmans or the second Nolan Batman.
What's the name of the second Nolan Batman?
Dark Knight.
What year did it come out?
God, what year was that?
2008.
2008.
Yeah.
1 year after
Right.
Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
So it's not like superhero movies at the time were just completely inept, right?
Way to just
It's true.
shit on my...
It's true.
I see where you're going with this.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, but you have a point.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, for all the criticism that's been levied over the years against Batman Returns, at the very least, it's not just a bad movie, and this is.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Batman Returns.
too.
Don't get me
One of
started.
my biggest.
I had
Yeah.
a dream last night that I got one of the Happy Meal toys.
Yes.
Still in its package from Batman Returns. You know the penguin in the little car?
I had that. Dude, you're probably like the third person I've ever in my entire life that even knows those existed. McDonald's pulled those because parents groups had,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Absolutely.
In my dream, I had one in the package that I got at a yard sale,
Right.
and no one knew how valuable it was.
Dude, maybe you
No one
might
knows.
find that at a yard sale if you like.
I tell people there were McDonald's toys, like, no, there weren't. Nobody remembers that.
Yeah, they got taken out real quick.
Okay.
Right, absolutely. That
Okay, so you have a point. Even at the time, I guess it was still bad.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's okay.
Okay.
All right, we've been going for about an hour and a half. What do you guys say we call it?
I think that's good.
Good.
All right. Well, listeners, if you're listening to this, which you probably won't be because this is our test episode, thank you for listening, and goodbye, everyone.
Happy test episode.
Goodbye.
We just get some food?